Ash breath hung over the village of Rivet Glass the night the crater bloomed open, and every potter in 3 valleys felt the tremor run along their thumbs. Naira felt it first as a shiver inside damp clay. She was trimming a chrysanthemum bowl when the wheel lurched beneath her foot, and the slip on her hands flashed hot like fresh-poured tea. The kiln doors at the far end of the workshop rattled, setting off little chimes nailed there to warn of quakes or worse. Old Master Irix lifted his soot-black lantern, peered toward the volcano's distant cone, and did not smile. "Ember spirits," he said the way fisherfolk mutter. "Storm's coming." Neera glanced through the window lattice. Night should have been smoky blue, the moon low, but the horizon flickered vermilion. "It's too early," she whispered. "The magmatic wakening isn't due till midwinters. We still have 42 nights." "Had," Irix corrected, wiping clay from his beard. "Time's decided to cheat us. The Phoenix runes are being cut now, whether the calendar's ready or not." Naira's heart stuttered. Every child in Riverglass knew the myth, how once a century ember spirits rose inside the volcano, carving incandescent runes across the magma fields, and how those runes coaxed a sliver of the sun to descend and nest among molten rivers until dawn. At sunrise, the fragment was meant to be sealed inside clay, cooled down to amber trance, and stored beneath the world, so daylight could bleed in slow, predictable doses for another 100 years. Fail the sealing, and the fragment would rocket skyward, dragging the whole worldwide dawn with it, leaving forests charcoaled and seas boiled to rust. Sealing the shard was always the province of the master potter. Irix had done it twice, first when he was fierce and spring-flexible, then again 99 years later, stooped but unstoppable. Neera had trained under his kiln smoke for 11 summers, learning slip ratios, kiln chance, and the secret difference between a vessel that merely held and a vessel that persuaded its contents to stay. Yet she was still apprentice, still without a personal hallmark on the great ledger wall. "Master," she began, voice all bone dust. "You'll do it again. I'll fetch your tongs. We'll charter a mule." He shook his head hard enough she felt the refusal knock against her ribs. "Listen." He placed a cup of half-fired porcelain before her. The vibration of the world hummed through it, scribing hairline cracks in evolving patterns that looked eerily like rising birds. "My hands are slower than last century. And something's different this cycle. The sun fragment's already cut loose from the magma flows." His eyes swam like glaze before the second firing. "I felt it leap." "Already?" Naira gasped. "But the runes aren't complete. Without full binding lines, the fragment will roam." Irix's silence was answer enough. Magma said, "In Volsely." Naira He walked to the shelf where the ledger of Kilnborn legends hung by an iron chain, tore out a charcoal stylus and signed a final flourish beneath the apprentice column. Almost, but not quite, across the boundary into master territory. "Riverglass cannot afford our usual ceremonious passing of titles," he murmured. "Tonight, my apprentice becomes the lone hand between dawn and ruin." He pressed the stylus into her fist. "Draw your own new fate." Lightning orange flashed outside, illuminating every mote of ash inside the workshop. Naira felt suddenly tiny, as if every bowl, jug and figurine she'd ever turned now towered high, judging. But terror came arm in arm with clarity. She had studied for this. To shape the shard's prison, she needed white stoneware clay from Nightcliff River, fused with obsidian sand for heat resilience. She needed a wheel that could spin at eclipse speed, a kiln hot enough to semi-vitrify without shattering, and she needed to finish before the first red edge of sunrise sliced the sky. Most urgent, she had to find the escaping fragment, subdue it, and keep it near while the vessel was born. Master Irix unclasped a leather satchel the color of scorched almonds, Inside lay a coil of twine woven from fireweed fibers, and all made of moon silver and a thumb-sized ball of dull black clay. "The Ember spirits gifted me this starter glob in my first cycle," he said. "Knead it into whatever vessel you craft. It carries the memory of earlier imprisonments. It will help remind the sun how small it can be." Naira bowed. The apprentice bowed deep enough for weeping humans and unstoppable gods. Then she laced the satchel across her chest, kicked the wheel brake, and sprinted into streets jittering with saffron light. Banners above town already smoked at their fringes. People stumbled from doorways, clutching children, buckets, or lucky raven feathers. They were used to volcanic shows, used to molten paint down the slopes, but nothing prepared them for the way heat now travelled ahead of sound, a foreshock of summer in their lung sacs. Some shouted warnings, some prayers. All stepped back when they saw Naira, haloed in the workshop's glow, clay on her elbows like war paint. "The apprentice potter," they murmured. "She goes to seal the sun." She'd never flown on confidence before, but their words lifted her boots. Down the central stairway she ran, across the stone bridge, humming red, toward Nightcliff's riverbank, where the cleanest clay slept under silt. Steam hissed through every fissure, and along ravines Myra glimpsed Ember spirits at work. They were smaller than stories said, not towering giants, but lank humanoids wrought of cinder and kiln flame, with filigree wings like still-forming glass. They knelt at the very edges of lava lanes, fists plunged elbow deep, sculpting runes that glowed brighter than sword steel in noon sun. Each finished character unfolded into the shape of a phoenix mid-ascension. Talons curled, beaks flared, feathers of arithmetic fractal perfectly spaced. With every rune a chirp of echo thunder rang, as though the newborn phoenix pattern cried once before freezing into stone. But gaps yawned between spirals. The script was incomplete, and the spirit's pace frantic. One raised its obsidian face toward Naira. Its ember eyes spun like coals in a smith's breath. When it spoke, the words were crackle, but she understood them in the blood beat of her ears. "Hurry, clay tamer! The shard drifts wild. We etch chains, but each link cools before the next is born. Without the prison of your art, our calligraphy is only poetry, not cage." "Where is the fragment?" Naira shouted. The spirit pointed a finger of living charcoal north, toward the oldest cavity of Morrow Peak, where lava seldom reached. There, a bead of daylight traced figure eights in the darkness, a living comet the size of a market melon and 10,000 times as bright. It seared the rock it passed, leaving permanent noon in trailing scars. By rights, it should have curled inside the magma bed until dawn. Without runes, complete it wandered, ignorant or indifferent to the world it endangered. Naira sucked through her teeth. She would need to coax the shard closer to her wheel, rather than drag her wheel into the crater, for kilns were not portable. Yet the shard could melt tandem stoneware with a wink. She must lull it, trick it, or charm it. In her satchel slept the black starter clay, ancestor to all prison vessels. She unwrapped it, kneaded it between her palms until it softened, then used the moon silver awl to etch a spiral. As she did so, she sang Eryx's kiln hymn. "Cool, cool, world's coal, temper fire, temper soul. Lie in loam, lie in bowl, bright bringer, burn no hole." Her voice quavered but held pitch. Ember spirits paused, carving to hum percussion, creating a low rumble like bellows through cavern halls. The sun fragment heard. It halted its looping dance and flicked toward her, curiosity crackling. Then it floated closer, radiance layered with the smell of lightning on citrus peel. Naira continued the song, extended the clay spiral like a lure. When the shard came within a spear's length, she felt her eyelashes sin. "Come rest," she coaxed, "in memory of rest." Light dimmed fractionally, as if the shard tasted the balm contained in the clay's ancient memory. It drifted into the spiral's dead center, orbited once, twice. Naira snapped the twine around it, a soft lasso soaked in river silt. The fragment resisted, brightness flaring, but the twine held. Threads designed centuries ago by Irix's first teacher, each fiber soaked in cooled lava, each knot burned by lunar eclipse light, with shard tethered, Nightcliff bolted for Nightcliff. The river had receded under the volcano's fever, exposing banks of pale clay like fat left outside a butcher's stall. She plunged her hands. The ground nearly curdled her skin, but she forged ahead, carving out chunks, kneading as she went, folding in obsidian sand chipped from the spirit runes. She worked the wheel set beside the river, an auxiliary wheel built for emergencies. Irix had insisted on it, though villagers laughed at the notion of a mobile apocalypse. Now Nira thanked every superstition ever thrown into a kiln. The wheel spun. She threw the first lump, centering it with heel of palm. Water jar at her side replaced by river steam condensing on her forearms. The shard whipped around her like a bird's straining leash. Each time its light pulsed, the clay threatened to harden prematurely. Yee! She had to balance wetness and willpower, keeping form without collapse. A vessel to imprison the sun could not be ornate. It must be perfect symmetry. No hidden air pockets. Walls thick enough to endure, but thin enough to cool quickly. Shape became poem. She pulled the cylinder upward, collaring, compressing rim, belly bulging just enough to mimic the solar roundness. She inscribed the lip with phoenix runes taught by the spirits, borrowed geometry that tricked fire into thinking it nested within its own source. Yet even as she formed the piece, dawn edged closer. Over mountain silhouettes, Nira saw a razor-thin thread of gold. Heat gusts deepened, laced with the smell of bark turning to sugar, then smoke. She transferred the vessel on a wooden paddle to the emergency kiln, a squat brick structure shaped like a buried tortoise, mouths of coal and vents of basalt. She stoked it with pine-pitch spheres wrapped in salamander skin. Flames roared. Kiln chants again. Hold! Hold! Hinge the heat! The Ember spirits arrived, finished with their frantic calligraphy. They aligned themselves in a circle round the kiln, palms outward, feeding excess thermal fury back into its maw, ensuring temperature soared past stoneware maturity point within heartbeats. Naira loosened the twine from the sunshard and lowered the dazzling orb toward the vessel, now glowing orange. She expected resistance, but the shard trembled like a bead of mercury facing a glass syringe, perhaps sensing home inside that precise curvature. It slipped in with a sigh that sounded almost like relief. Lid next, Naira had thrown it earlier as a disc, carved with matching runes. She tapped it on, quick as clapping a mosquito, and slammed the kiln door. Inside, glaze concocted from ground moonstone began to melt, sealing any microcracks, welding lid to lid. But the kiln bricks vibrated. The shard wasn't done fighting. Through spy-hole, Naira saw the vessel's walls bulge as though lungs inhaled magma. If it burst inside the kiln, pieces would rocket out, freeing Dawn early. She remembered Irix's lesson. The prisoner must be convinced, not forced. Potters did not just shape clay, they sculpted stories into the matrix of the pot. Narratives the contents could read. Nira snatched the awl and traced symbols upon the kiln's exterior. Swift ideographs of cradle, hearth, horizon, bedtime, mother. She spoke them aloud so heat carried the acoustics inward. She promised the shard continuity. You will blaze again. You are not ending, only dreaming till the world is ready. In 100 years we'll wake you with songs. The bulging softened. Pressure bled away like wind through pine needles. Vessel settled. Yet sunrise would not halt. Light raced across ridgebacks, licking treetops, illuminating the first windows of rivet glass. There remained the final quenching. The vessel had to be removed from kiln, cooled in Nightcliff's waters before global day finished brewing, or residual solar specks might leak. But the kiln still glowed at dragon-forging temperatures. No human tongs could survive. Naira's arms were mottled with heat welts already. A crackle voice behind her, "We will aid." Two ember spirits stepped forward, their skin natural to such flame. Together they yanked the door, reached in with bare garnet fingers, and lifted the jug radiant white. It rang like a bell, a single high note that made Naira's teeth chatter. The spirits walked to the river's edge. Steam retreated in a circle and set the vessel upon a flat basalt shelf. "Now," Naira breathed. She plunged a long pole under the vessel's shoulders, tilted it, rolled it into the shallows. Water exploded into columnar vapor, and half the river flashed to cloud. But what remained cooled the clay to cherry red, then plum, then dusky blood. When Naira finally touched it, it felt no hotter than new bread. She lifted the vessel just small enough to cradle, just heavy enough to remind her of its occupant's arrogance. Phoenix runes flickered, then stabilized into dull copper. No light seeped from seams. Behind her, the horizon completed its brassy reveal. Dawn broke full. But it was ordinary dawn, not torrent, not furnace. Birds resumed song, cautious but alive. Villagers gather at riverbanks, eyes wide, faces lit with the soft yellow of survival. When they saw Naira holding that muted jug, they knelt, not in worship exactly, but in acknowledgement that some stories demanded their knees. Partially, a hush. Then old Master Irix shuffled forward, leaning on an oak cane that looked suspiciously a rolling pin turned vertical. He coughed out clay dust. "You have thrown the 100-year cradle," he announced. "I stand witness." Naira felt her throat clog. "Master, He raised a finger. "From this sunrise on, you are Master Potter of Rivet Glass. May your name endure longer than any glaze." Ember spirits lined the riverbank too. Their molten eyes softened to ember coals. One bowed their version was a tilt of shoulders like sliding tectonic plates. "The runes are complete," it said. "Your vessel is final punctuation." Naira looked at her hands, blistered and smeared with obsidian sparkles. She thought of the first pot she ever made, lopsided, glazed in teen thumbprints, and of the centuries-old fragment inside the jug, now entrusted to her guardianship. She suddenly understood kiln wisdom. Clay keeps memory. Memory guides fire. She carried the vessel up the hill to Rivet Glass's vault, a cavern room beneath the town hall, where previous sun shards slept in neat chronological rows, each jug labelled by potter seal. Sarun, Lanthis, Irix. An empty niche waited, lined with basalt velvet. She placed her jug there, hearing the subtle thrum of contained cosmos. As she turned to leave, she noticed the jug made by Irix a century earlier. Its phoenix runes were faint, lid edges slightly chipped, yet it had done its duty. All vessels age. Memory, too, must be renewed by fresh hands. Outside, ordinary sunlight streamed warm on smithies and bakeries. Children chasing hoop rings scarcely believed there'd been peril at all. That was good. Peace should forget the teeth that guard it. At twilight, Naira found Irix on the workshop porch, puffing his pipe of kiln-dried cherrywood. He watched sparks swirl into the sky like minuscule cousins of the new prisoner. "I should ask for your hallmark," he said, offering her the ledger and a jar of ink ground from cooled lava tears. Naira pressed her thumbprint under the master column, then signed in smooth strokes, "Naira of Rivet Glass, 3rd Cycle Keeper." She paused, dipped brush again, and below her name wrote a single line more. "Fire remembers what hands teach it." Rick smiled, a glaze crackle smile, and nodded toward the horizon where black silhouettes of ember spirits receded into night. "Teach it well," he said. "We are clay too, in the end, and dawn always returns for another shaping." That night the village slept under a perfectly ordinary quilt of stars, but if one listened beneath that hush, they might catch the muffled heartbeat of a sun fragment, lulled by phoenix runes and apprentice now master lullabies, dreaming century-long dreams about the next time it would rise to dance above magma flows, and who would be waiting, wheel spinning, to welcome it back to rest.